Hello, and thank you for watching this Hexagon Geospatial e-training module, Creating Dynamic Labels with GeoMedia. Dynamic labels allow you to automatically generate labels using defined rules, attributes, and expression statements. These parameters are set by using the Label Manager. As you zoom and pan around your data, the dynamic labels are automatically redrawn to fit your data based on the properties defined. There are cases where dynamic labels can slow the display of your data. You can either modify the placement, number of rules, or turn off the dynamic labels to speed up the display. Our focus today will be understanding how to generate dynamic labels by using the properties and rules within the Label Manager. I'll begin by selecting the Label tab from the GeoMedia ribbon. This displays the tools used when working with and creating labels. On the far left of the placement group, I'll open the Label Manager. The Label Manager allows me to select the feature classes to label and define their rules and properties. In the Label Manager, I'll click on Parcels to select the feature class. Then I'll select Properties to open the Properties dialog box. First, I'll need to define the text used to create the label. I can either use the expression builder or select an attribute to use as the text. In this case, I'll select the attribute parcelNum to use as the label. This tells GeoMedia to use the parcel number as defined in the attribute table as the label for each parcel. In the Style section, I have the option to change the font. Here I'll leave the default option. I can also change the size. I'll make it a little larger so it's easier to see. You can see the preview generated on the right. Once finished, I can click OK. Each feature class in the Label Manager has two columns with checkmarks available, Label and Obstacle. Obstacle contains a checkmark by default and tells the software to consider obstacles, such as other boundaries, other features, or text when placing the labels. By clicking the Rules button, I can define how labels are placed, including what happens when a label encounters an obstacle. We'll see more about rules a bit later. In this case, I'll leave the defaults. There's also a Label column. Checkmarks are added to the Label column to indicate which features will have labels. In this first example, I'll put the checkmark only in the Parcel column. When everything's defined, I'll click OK in the Label Manager. To generate the labels, I'll click the Toggle Dynamic button in the Placement group on the Label tab. The labels are added to the viewer. This first example has created only some of the labels I need, leaving many parcels without a label. Within the Label Manager, we defined the label attribute, the font size, and told the software to consider obstacles. By leaving the default rules, we have also defined a horizontal placement. With these parameters, most of our labels don't meet the requirements to be placed in the map view and are therefore not drawn in the map window. Let's go back to the Label Manager and modify the rules. I'll first make sure the parcels is selected in the list. Clicking on the Rules button opens the Rules properties. This dialog will look different when working with point, line, or polygon features. Here we see the rules that can be defined for polygon features. The section on the left defines where the label is placed. We can turn off the Place Horizontal option and select Place at Dominant Angle. This tells the software to find the widest point on the feature and place the label along that line. There are other options in this section with examples to the right. You can make a selection based on your map criteria. On the lower left, I have the option to allow stacking of the label text. I can also define how many lines of stacking are allowed. On the upper right, I can allow font reduction and define how many steps of reduction are okay. This allows the text to become smaller when it doesn't fit based on the other defined rules. I'll turn this option on and set the number of steps to 3. Below this, I can allow labels to cross lines or apply leader lines and choose the leader line style. This is useful in cases where a feature is very small and a label would not otherwise be placed for that feature. I'll add a check mark to this option. Finally, I have the option to allow overlapping labels. When I've defined all the rules that I need, I can click Create and OK to the Label Manager. Because the Toggle Dynamic button is already active, the labels are added to the map window. This time, we see most parcels have labels, and if you look closely, leader lines have been added when needed. We'll open the Label Manager again, remove the check mark from Obstacles, and click OK. Now all parcels in the map window are given a label. I'll reset my map view and remove the parcel feature class to get a better look at placing line labels. From the Label Manager, I'll select Street Centers and open the Properties. I'll select SFEANME as the text attribute. This will apply the street name as the label. I'll also set the font size and then click OK. I'll apply the check mark in the Street Center's label column and click OK to the Label Manager. Again, we've used the default line rules to place the labels. Now I'll go in and modify them. With Street Centers highlighted in the list, I'll select Rules. The rule properties now contain line label rules. Many are similar to the polygon rules, but more specific to a linear feature. On the left, we can specify where along the line the label will be applied and if it will be above, below, or split above and below the line feature. We can also decide how the label is applied when the feature is joined with another. In the middle column, we have rules to allow stacking and to define the spacing of words and repeat labels. I'll turn on the font reduction and set it to 3 steps as we did before. On the right, we have the ability to allow labels to cross lines, use leader lines, and allow for overlapping labels. When I'm done setting my preferences, I can click Create in the Rule Properties and OK in the Label Manager. The labels are added and now we see the street name applied to each street. Now I'll use the Label Manager properties to build an expression to add the street type to the street name. Next to text, I'll click Expression. In the Expression Builder, I can see that the street name attribute is already being used. I can now use this tool to add to this expression and include the street type attribute. If the expression is correct, the red exclamation point will not be seen and I can click OK. I'll click OK to each dialog box and load the new labels. Finally, I'll add a new point feature class and see how to add point labels. Using the Legend tool on the Home tab, I'll add Restaurants to the map window. I'll return to the Label Manager and highlight Restaurants. The label will come from the Address attribute and I'll increase the font size. I'll place a check mark in the Restaurants label column and open the rules. Again, stacking, font reduction, crossing lines, leader lines, and overlapping labels are preferences for point labels. On the left, we have the ability to define a placement order preference around the point feature. A default pattern has been defined, but I can clear the default by clicking Clear All. Clicking on the predefined positions allows me to define the preferred placement order. When I'm happy with the settings, I can click Create and OK to the Label Manager, and the labels are updated. When needed, I have the option to remove all labels by turning off the Toggle Dynamic button on the Labeling tab. This clears all labels from the map window. Thank you for watching this e-training module from Hexagon Geospatial. For more e-training, visit hexagongeospatial.com/etraining.